Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now this is a site I have showed you before, but I've never talked about, and I think this deserves to be spoken about. And there are a certain number of sites from around the world that you really have to question how old they really are, and it's a possibility they stretch back to a time in antiquity that we really don't have a clue about. This is the Great Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. And it has been covered up by sedimentation and obviously tree growth that would have taken thousands of years. And it covers 45 acres at the base, and the Great Pyramid in Egypt covers only 13 acres, and volume-wise, this is most likely the largest pyramid in the world. And the base of it goes all the way around here, and you can see the remnants, or there still is part of the original structure sticking out. And I made a video a while back, just a quick look at it, and this is what it looks like underneath without the sedimentation and the tree growth. That is a very impressive, huge structure volume-wise. I'm saying it's most likely the largest in the world. And that's what has been stated by many researchers. And I'm going to take you down here to Street View here, and we're going to just take a peek at it. And here is a good look. And this original structure here, extremely impressively built. And you see how it just disappears into the mountain here, or the hill that it now looks like today. It just disappears in there. And when civilizations have come along, they've kind of added their own construction to this original mound. And here you see much different stonework than what was in the original structure, obviously. And this is becoming a common theme with some famous pyramids that I have been looking into and have looked into, that they are built over original structures, and that a set of Graham Hancock has mentioned that possibly even about the Great Pyramid. It's been stated about Teotihuacan. I showed you El Castillo from Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula is built over two older constructions. So you really have to ask, you know, if the pyramid and the constructions that were done by the Aztecs and the Mayans are, 1,000 or 2,000 years old, how old are those original structures? That is really a question that needs to be brought up. Now we're overhead again. I just wanted to mention up here, this is a church that was built on top of the pyramid some centuries back. And I want to take you down to Street View here on the opposite side that I showed you before. If I can operate my computer here. But this is a good look from Street View at what this ancient complex looks like today. And some people call it a temple, not a pyramid. Just want to mention that. But here you can see how our current world has kind of taken over this ancient structure. But here you can see it's still peeking out from the sedimentation and the overgrowth. And this is one huge complex. Maybe the largest pyramid structure in the world. But now I just want to do a little bit of reading. Now I'm going to read from Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. And he wrote this book in 1882, and he was looked upon as a crackpot and a kook, much the same way as a lot of alternative researchers have been looked upon whenever they mention Atlantis. But news coming from the archaeological world has pretty much confirmed what they are theorizing about. And I'm sure if Ignatius Donnelly was alive today, he'd be pretty happy with the discoveries that have been made in the last few decades that really stretch the history of man really multiple times farther back than the current standard model of history has shown. But I just want to read here, and I think there's a fascinating story coming from Cholula that clearly resembles the Tower of Babel story. And I'm just going to read. It says, Father Duran, in his manuscript, Historia Antigua de la Nueva España, coming from 1585, quotes from the lips of a native of Cholula, over 100 years old, a version of a legend as to the building of the Great Pyramid of Cholula. It is as follows. In the beginning, before the light of the sun had been created, this land Cholula was in obscurity and darkness and void of any created thing. And I think that doesn't speak of the creation of the world itself. I think it is the creation of our current age, coming from a period of darkness, following a cataclysm, most likely an impact of a comet or an asteroid or a large meteorite, or possibly many fragmented pieces hitting the Earth and throwing the Earth into darkness, which would clearly have been the result of a massive impact. But it says, and immediately after the light and the sun arose in the east, there appeared gigantic men of deformed stature, and possessed the land, and desiring to see the nativity of the sun as well as his occident, proposed to go and seek them, dividing themselves into two parties, some journeyed to the west and others towards the east. These traveled until the sea cut off their road, whereupon they determined to return to the place from which they started, and arriving at this place, Cholula, not finding the means of reaching the sun, enamored of his light and beauty, they determined to build a tower so high that its summit could reach the sky. Having collected materials for the purpose, they found a very adhesive clay and bitumen, with which they speedily commenced to build the tower, and having reared it to the greatest possible altitude, so that they say it reached to the sky, the Lord of the heavens and raids said to the inhabitants of the sky, have you observed how they of the earth have built a high and haughty tower to mount hither, being enamored of the light of the sun and his beauty? Come and confound them, because it is not right that they of the earth, living in the flesh, should mingle with us. Immediately the inhabitants of the sky sallied forth like flashes of lightning. They destroyed the edifice, and divided it, and scattered its builders to all parts of the earth. And it says, one can recognize in this legend the recollection by a ruder race of a highly civilized people, for only a highly civilized people would have attempted such a vast work. Their mental superiority and command of the arts gave them the character of giants who arrived from the east. And I find that fascinating that Ignatius Donnelly, the giants has been brought up a lot, but he just says that is in reference, they would have been in the character of giants who arrived from the east and who had divided into two great emigrations, one moving eastward, the other westward. They were sun worshippers, for we are told they were enamored of the light and the beauty of the sun, and they built a high place for his worship. And it says the Pyramid of Cholula is one of the greatest constructions ever erected by human hands. It is even now in its ruined condition, 160 feet high, 1,400 feet square at the base, and covers 45 acres. We have only to remember that the greatest pyramid of Egypt, Cheops, covers only 12 or 13 acres to form some conception of the magnitude of this American structure. Now, going on here, he writes, it must not be forgotten that this legend was taken down from the lips of an old Indian who was born before Columbus sailed from Spain. Observe the resemblances between this legend and the Bible account of the building of the Tower of Babel. All was a plain without hill or elevation, says the Indian legend. They found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there, says the Bible. They built a brick in both cases. Let us build us a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, says the Bible. They determined to build a tower so high that its summit should reach the sky, says the Indian legend. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men had builded. And the Lord said, Behold, nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down and confound them, says the Bible record. The Lord of the heavens and raids said to the inhabitants of the sky, Have you observed, etc., come and confound them, says the Indian record. And the Lord scattered them abroad from thence all the face of the earth, says the Bible. They scattered its builders to all parts of the earth, says the Mexican legend. Can anyone doubt that these two legends must have sprung in some way from one another, or from one common source? there are enough points of difference to show that the American is not a servile copy of the Hebrew legend. In the former story comes from a native of Cholula. It is told under the shadow of the mighty pyramid it commemorates. It is a local legend which he repeats. The men who built it, according to his account, were foreigners. They built it to reach the sun, that is to say, as a sun temple, while in the Bible record, Babel was built to perpetuate the glory of its architects. In the Indian legend, the god stops a work by a great storm. In the Bible account, by confounding the speech of the people. Both legends were probably derived from Atlantis and refer to some gigantic structure of great height built by that people, and when the story emigrated to the east and west, it was one case affixed to the Tower of the Chaldeans, and in another to the Pyramid of Cholula. And that is all up for speculation, but I think that's fascinating writing coming from 1882, when not a lot of information from Atlantis was available. And the similarity between that and the biblical story, I think, is very fascinating. Now, going over to this website here, I'm not going to read, but I will leave this link below if you want to read some history on Cholula, according to this website, which is aztechistory.com, and it talks about artifacts and things found at Cholula. And here you can see the pyramid, which is being lost to our current world, and sedimentation, and just some more pictures. And of course, there are tunnels underneath this pyramid, as with many ancient pyramids that come from a time that you really have to question. And I believe this is all symbolic of their underworld, an important teaching coming from these ancient cultures. But I will leave that link below. So that is a little bit of my thoughts and a look at Cholula, and a little bit of reading from an old legend coming from Cholula that was probably passed down from generation to generation. And this is where Cholula is located. And I hope you thought this was interesting. And you all have a nice day. And maybe I should come up with a different ending.